Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Dateable, a show all about modern dating. When we first started this podcast, I have a confession. I really thought that any topics or discussions around dating had to involve you dating. And I never really thought about talking about dating when you're single or alone or lonely. It just felt like dating needed to involve other people in the story. But our guest today will prove us wrong. And actually, I think previous episodes have proved us wrong that dating is really about dating yourself as well. That's really most of that journey. So we got Minji here. She is currently living in Los Angeles. She's been there for 6 years, but she is originally from the Yay area. She's 34, pretty single, and has been taking a dating sabbatical and also actively going on dates, on and off.
Virtually.
It's a mixed bag.
So what's interesting about Minji's story is that she recently broke up with a long-term boyfriend that she lived with for 2 years about 8 months ago, and she's been learning how to be alone.
Oh wait, how many months ago? 6. Sorry.
6 months ago. Okay.
Sorry.
So Minji recently broke up with a long-term boyfriend that she lived with for 2 years, whom she broke up with about 6 months ago. She's been learning how to be alone and independent again and navigating the single life in her 30s during a time of COVID-19. I mean, it's like so many different layers. And then on top of it all, it's COVID-19 quarantine. So she's been thinking about her identity, future marriage, self-love, family, etc., and starting to explore dating again, but through a new lens and wanting to support others grappling with all of the above. She is also the host of the podcast, First of All. So hi, Minji. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing as wonderful as a human being in the United States during quarantine can be doing. So
hanging in there. We were just joking around. What was we were talking about the meme that you saw, Julie?
Oh yeah, about how it was like 2013, all you had to do is Netflix and chill, and then 2020, it's like you gotta survive a pandemic, be in like the demise of capitalism, and just like this entire revolution that we're in right now. So yeah, shit got real in 2020, that's for sure.
Just a wee bit.
Real. But you know this is what I've been just thinking about, is it puts everything in perspective. All that shit that we dealt with last year was nothing. I mean, that literally is nothing. It means nothing anymore. And everything we're dealing with this year, this is the real stuff. This is the stuff that will affect our future and impact our lives forever. But this is also a time that everyone's trying to deal with self-identity, dealing with what do I really want in life? What do I want in love? What is this journey I'm on? If I'm truly in control of my life, what does that really mean? And am I making the right decisions? So when we were on Minji's podcast last week, we talked about some of these, and we dabbled with Minji's story about breaking up this long-term relationship about 6 months ago. But today we get to dive deep into your learnings and where you are currently. So let's start with, just tell us about you claiming that you're like a serial monogamous even before your last boyfriend. What has been your relationship experience up until this last one?
That is to be written and created into many shows, books, and certainly been evaluating all of that in the last 6 months for sure. But in the nutshell, I think the best way to summarize it is the whole serial monogamous terminology that has been thrown around for quite some time. Actually, like in the grand scheme of things, not that long. I feel like it's a pretty new, in our lifetimes at least, I don't know how many people in our parents' generation use serial monogamous.
Well, that's because everyone was a serial monogamous then, and now no one is. So that's why it's a term.
It's a thing. Agreed. Because I've been crushing on boys as far back as I can remember, and like kind of the hopeless romantic, like always wanting to find the Prince Charming, Disney princess, the whole shebang. And I started dating, I would say honestly, if we're going on objective criteria, I feel like I started dating in elementary school. Like seriously, my first love was when I was 10.
Your
And
first love.
So,
as a grown woman, I can vouch, like we were legit in love.
So you had a period of being extensively single then? Or is this
So that's the funny path was since like 5th grade, I feel like there was always a boy, there was always somebody that I was into or, you know, figuring things out with, and in that romantic, you know, bubble, and just like bouncing from one to the next and just falling deeply in love and getting heartbroken, etc., until I was honestly almost 30 years old. There was rarely a time where I had like an extended period of time. And I actually went back and did the math. I think the max between boyfriends prior to like being like around 29 was maybe like 4 months, which is not that long. It makes me a little cringy now to be like, wow, that's a really short amount of time to go from like one serious relationship to another. So there's a little bit of shame here.
Was there anyone in that time? Like, were you actively dating and like had people that might not have been your boyfriend, or was it just a alone time? So I think that's different.
That's what I'm wondering. Like realistically, I don't even feel like I was really alone. Like I was talking to somebody, or a previous flame would come back into the picture and knock me off my feet a little bit, or just like cause turmoil. That's why I'm exhausted, you guys. Because
I've thought about that before, and I'm like, oh, I was single in this period. But I'm like, wait, there were people in that period. You know, it's like, it's not, and there's only been like one time, at least in my life, that I was like dead single. So I don't know if that's what you're in now, or like where there's been a difference.
Yeah, I think again, what are the criteria, right? And if we are to say that you're not talking to somebody that there's potential, or that someone's not in pursuit of you, and you're not, again, in that headspace or like dealing with emotions in that way, I feel like that would be like truly single, not dating. Then maybe like not never, but it's just, I think that amount of time be really, really small. It'd be really small.
I think everyone, when they're dating, they're either going into something or getting out of something.
Yeah.
I really think everyone's on a path in or out. And it's really rare to be completely single. I think I've only been completely single for like 2 or 3 months of my life too, where it's like not talking to anybody.
Exactly.
Well, when I had that experience of being completely single, I guess I wasn't technically, because I was like getting over a heartbreak. So that's where it was. But there was no one, like, I was not actively talking to anyone. I guess, Minji, so right now in coronavirus, where dating is a little limited by default, like, are you talking to people, or you feel like you are pretty single?
I've been pretty single, but recently, I started dabbling back into the online dating thing. There was part of it that wasn't, again, the agendas are so different, right? Like, am I doing it because I'm looking for the next relationship? The age thing does play a role, which we started talking about last week, just like where I'm at in life and what I've experienced thus far and what I'm healing from, what I feel ready for. But really, it's part of it is just pure boredom, like there's so much happening, and in essence, a lot of it in general, like throughout my life has been partially just to like feed my ego a little bit, or, it's fun. Dating's fun, or like romance is fun. If I've not been a big drinker, I'm not big on like weed, or I've just never been on substances. I joked with my friends that like romance and dating was like my drug of choice. Like I'd rather like flirt or something than have a cocktail. I don't know.
But if I'm doing the calculations correctly, if you broke up with this long-term relationship, this boyfriend 6 months ago, this is the longest you've been single for. But do you, right?
Technically, so what I would say is I'm 34 now. The breakup before this boyfriend, the last serious boyfriend, there was a couple years of being.
Oh, okay.
I mean, okay, actually, so what I'll label as single is like I didn't have a boyfriend. I didn't have a serious boyfriend between the end of 2014 to the end of 2017. So 3 years of like I dated casually, but never did not have a monogamous, like serious, you're my boyfriend, introducing you to my friends and family situation for 3 years. That was the longest that
but there were men in your rotation.
There were men in the rotation.
In the funnel. in the man funnel. So
Yes.
if that is the case, then it must mean that after a few years of being quote unquote single, and then you finally meet this man and you guys enter into a relationship, it must be significant, because you're bouncing back from a couple years of not having a boyfriend.
Yeah.
And then having this breakup. So let's revisit the breakup if we can. Walk us through what happened and why it happened.
Whew, how much time do we have? Well, it's just, yeah, I mean, it's been 6 months, so I've had a lot of time to process it. It was, in essence, technically it was mutual, I suppose. There was just a lot of, this is no disrespect to my ex. I think he's a wonderful human being. It was just a signifier of where we were at as two individuals. I think there was a lot of love and a lot of passion and friendship, but there was also a lot of codependency, I think, at the end of the day. And it's easy to muddle all of those. And when you're still figuring out who you are as an individual, it's easy to kind of like project your stuff onto somebody else, or like avoid dealing with your own stuff. So as much as like there were so many really wonderful things about that relationship, and that's why I stayed in it for 2 years, just me, a lot of it had to do with my age and where I was at in life, and the number of serious relationships I had gone through, and my maturity / on the other side of like my maybe lack of tolerance for certain things, of like wanting to really figure some things out and having some sort of concrete plans or steps for the future. And if it wasn't, then it's not, it sounds so shitty to be like, well, what are we doing then? But like realistically, as a woman, I'm really just accepting and owning this. It's like, I'm on a different clock, man. And I don't resent that anymore. I accept it. It is what it is, but I'm on a different clock. And I don't have, I made decisions about what I want in my life that I was like, I can't just be like, well, let's figure it out.
Well, I feel like you think that like the reason why most people break up is they either like someone cheats or does something terrible, but I think the majority of the time it actually is just incompatible life stage, or they're at different places at different times. So I feel like your story is resonating, and I'm sure a lot of listeners out there have like been in similar situations, that it's like, I don't necessarily want it to end, but it's very clear that we're just not on the same timeline at all.
I agree. Yeah.
In our recent episode called Relationships, Do You Even Want One? Our guests talk about that sometimes a relationship just runs its course. You have to break up before it gets really ugly, and you just have to appreciate and be grateful for your time together. And if two people are not on the same page for moving forward with that relationship, then it's, no matter how much you love each other, as Mark Manson said, love is just simply not enough.
Yeah.
But you go through this breakup and you go through the healing process, and all of a sudden COVID hits and you find yourself being in quarantine alone. Walk us through how that's really impacted your whole healing process.
Yeah, absolutely. To start that off, I say quarantine has been the biggest blessing in my life, to be completely honest. We broke up in December. It was right before Christmas, which is a great time to just have your heart put in a blender. And again, there's no great way to break up, whether it's because, someone cheated, which I've dealt with, or because you realize that somebody you love really, really deeply is just not working out. Either way, it sucks. It's like having a part of you, especially at that point, 2 years and living with someone, having full integration of like two lives merged together as one, to untangle that emotionally, physically. He moved out. Like, it was really terrible. It was like a shitty time. So in that way, I felt like going into quarantine was a way to like cocoon me a little bit. And I was very grateful that I didn't have to see anybody, because it really knocked me on my ass, you guys. Like there's something about the nature of this relationship, the timing of it, in terms of where I am at life, the expectations that I had and the hopes that I had of I had pictured a life with him, you know, and we had been acting in accordance to that expectation in playing house, you know, and dealing with money and our careers, and like our families had, you know, partially met and had Thanksgiving, you know, like there's a lot to unpack and to let go of. So I don't say it in a cute way. Like I just felt like completely obliterated by that breakup. And I had a lot of reconciling to do with myself, because the way that I reacted in that breakup, and I've been through multiple breakups, it kicked my ass. And I think getting that space to just like completely disconnect from the world on purpose, because I quote unquote had to, I really am grateful for it. As sucky as the circumstances, I'm not trying to take away.
For sure.
Anything.
So walk us through, okay, so what would your immediate, you mentioned that you kind of had to like unravel your life together. Like you knows this, I just love a good timeline. I love to hear the, you know, verbatim of what's happening. So like, when do you think that you started to kind of like, I guess, did you immediately move out, or did he move out? Like, what was kind of the logistics there? And at what point were you kind of like on your own?
It was pretty abrupt. Well, the thing is that I don't feel like a lot of breakups don't happen too abruptly, even though like the final conversation might be the thing, you know, the nail. But first of all, breakups take hella long to like actually sink in and be truly complete, right? So in that objective way, like it took months for us to actually break up. But technically we broke up before Christmas, and within 2 days of us having the conversation, because his family, his living situation was out of state, and he had been living with me in LA, within 48 hours of this conversation, he was gone.
Oh, wow.
Which was brutal. And it was right before Christmas. So the magnitude of that stark, he's here 1 minute and and all of his stuff and everything that we shared is like, it's like sucked out and like completely absent out of my life. I didn't want to come home. I was thinking about moving. I was thinking about like, I can't be here, because I was devastated. And yes, but I mean, in terms of the issues that had been coming up, you know, they had some time to be brought up for several months prior to the breakup. So there's always, you know, a ramp, I guess. I don't know if it's an on ramp or off ramp.
An
like
on and off ramp.
Yeah, you know, it's terrible. And there at each point, you know, when you're reflecting back on it, you're like, at what point could we have turned it around? Or, you know, if we had made a different decision, or if we had had that conversation, and if, you know, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, right? There were multiple moments that we're reconciling the fact that we are on two different pages. The way that we're dealing with these hardships was also revealing of like compatibility, right? Because I was having massive anxiety, and I don't blame him. Like after all is said and done, like I went through so much hurt, and I definitely played like the resentful, bitter ex-girlfriend at different moments. I've gone through that whole roller coaster. But, you know, when you have the time to step back, I'm like, I get why he was trying to honestly do right by me and say, not overcommit to something that he wasn't ready for. And I appreciate that.
So, okay, so he leaves within 48 hours. Then you said that you went on this like roller coaster. Like, at what point was it quarantine? Was that like kind of when things started to come together, or were not come together, but acceptance of it? Or were you like more accepting, or maybe acceptance isn't the right word, but I guess just tell us where your emotions were at.
Well, I want to know what you guys think about this, because what I've noticed in my own, I've seen patterns, right? And there's even memes about this, because they, you know, the meme is that right in the direct aftermath of a breakup, women experience the breakup like right then and there.
Right away.
Devastation is immediate.
Yeah.
It's like it's inescapable. It's just right there, right? It's front loaded. That's the way I say it. I front load all the despair.
That's a good way to put it.
It kind of trickles down, you know, who knows how long that takes, but it kind of tapers off from there. A lot of guys, again, this is so generalized and so sexist, but like a lot of heterosexual men will like enter a kind of a denial phase, or just like, I can't even deal with this, so I'm not gonna. And whether that's conscious or not, I don't know, but like they'll go kick it with people or do whatever to distract themselves.
There are studies that would confirm that women definitely like process it at the beginning more.
Can you
So
enlighten me?
when I was a dating coach, I only coached men.
Mm.
And most of them would come to me and say, can you just tell me how to get more dates? Can you tell me how to be more attractive to women? And when you go deeper, it's always an ex that triggers something in them to come to me, where on the surface level, they think they need some sort of like really shallow help. But when you dig deeper, it's always something they did not address with an ex. So the pattern I was seeing was, for women, as soon as they go through the breakup, it's like talk it out, think it out, talk it out, think it out, cry it out, think it out, talk it out, blah. I will talk to my local barista. I will call up my mom at 3 a.m. if I need to talk to her. But men, and again, I agree with you. I don't want to generalize, but this is what I've saw in the pattern. It's 100% of the men that I coach, that they would go through immediately. It's not even denial, it's distraction. Because you know what their friends would do? They go, let's go to the bars. Let's hit a club. Let's get you out of your house. Let's get you meeting girls.
Yeah,
so
get a new girl.
And that first month is bliss. They're like, I don't miss my ex at all. This is awesome. I'm meeting new chicks. I'm like hanging out all the time. I'm hanging out with my boys. It's after that first or second month, it's either like a smell that reminds them of their ex, or a social media post, a trigger, something happens and they freaking blow up. Like that's when shit goes down, when they're like, holy shit, I haven't processed any of my despair. I don't know what I'm feeling right now. And why do I feel so lost? And that's when they literally burst and they don't know who to turn to. But by then, the women have already kind of gone through their healing process, and they're just like, both people, like the guy, a lot of times will come back passively. It's either a like on a social media post or a quick text, just thinking about you. By then, the woman is basically kind of over it.
I call it the 1 month rule, because no fail, they always come back in a month. A month on the dot. Like it's no fail every single time. And I agree with you. It's so hard because, I mean, I've had just like an earth-shattering breakup that I literally could not get out of bed when it happened. Like I remember just feeling so down on it. And then you start to feel better. You've talked to a zillion of your girlfriends and they're like, please stop talking about this. You've been listed in therapy. You know, it's like you've gone through all this. You're starting to mend. And then like as soon as you're starting to mend, it's like they know and they just come right back. Like it's no fail every time.
So this is like psychologically, sorry, Minji,
no, go for it.
Cut you off. I just want to say before I forget, because I'm losing my mind sometimes. Psychologically, what I learned was through a relationship, a woman is driven by her own internal voice. And that voice it's a really strong voice, and it guides them through all the pressures and all the timeline questions and all of that. Like it's our internal voice is what drives us through relationships. For men, it's multiple voices. They're like dealing with multiple voices, whether it's their friends, society, whatever it may be. They don't actually have one strong voice that drives them. So after a breakup, a woman's strong voice is the one that's guiding them through the breakup, and they feel like they can rely on this person because this internal voice has been there with them this whole time. For the guy, all the voices kind of disappear and they don't find their voice. And that's why there's a lot of confusion on what should I be feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And this is why, like, eventually when they do find their voice, it's like months and months down the line.
Interesting.
It's just we're just not on the same timeline. And I'm not generalizing. This is pure psychology.
So and I'm personally fascinated by that. I find a lot of like right now, poetically, theoretically, I think that's very beautiful because that's why we have movies and music and like, you know, is because of this eternal push pull,
right?
You know, mad dance. I don't even know what to call it.
Whatever it is.
What even
so
is
Minji,
it?
Okay, so a month in, did your ex come back and where are you at?
I mean, it was less than a month. It was again.
It was the next day.
It was again. It's the holidays. It's Christmas and New Year's. There's a lot of reflecting, and it's again the tough thing of we never had a shortage of love. There was no like absence of like desire. There was no absence of devotion. It was trying to accept this shitty truth that
Right.
maybe I'm not the best person for you right now in both aspects. Like I had to deal with that. He had to deal with that. So we're both trying to do the right thing for ourselves / each other, which is very noble, but we're both human beings and it's just going to suck to like, again, you're detoxing from somebody. That sounds very terrible, but like,
You
you
are
know, they,
though. You totally are.
you're detoxing from them. And, so yeah, we had a roller coaster. I mean, it was roller coastered up until quarantine. Actually, you know, I feel terrible because I'm the one that's like volunteering our story in public. But, you know, up until quarantine, we're back and forth about like, can we work this out? Because we did care about each other so much and had made stupid mistakes and hurt each other in the interim. But right up until quarantine, like literally into March, so 3 months after, we're talking about, should we meet up? Should we try to work it out? And that was really painful. It was super, super painful just to, again, you've gone through all that. For me, I was like, I've gone through 3 solid months of like, literally, if I'm not sleeping, I am toiling over this breakup. I'm trying to process every emotion. I'm looking at every pro and con. I'm talking to my counselors, and it's not just women. Like my brother is one of my best friends, and he's always been such a great male, you know, mind, and he's always looking out for me, but he doesn't coddle me. He doesn't tell me bullshit. Like he keeps it very real. So, you know, just like kind of going through every aspect, even talking with my ex, like just we're ping-ponging, like pinballing all over the place. It was a lot.
And did you see each other as well?
We ran, so it's just, again, the K-drama continues in the snow. We met at Sundance, and Sundance happens in January. And so in a very dramatic fashion, we saw each other at Sundance. And that was also like a moment of like, I really freaking miss you. You know, it was really hard. Yeah, it was tough. So we did see each other in January and then went back to our respective states doing our thing. And I'm trying to just get over it. He's trying to get over it. It was rough, man. It was rough.
So, okay. So was it quarantine? Like, was that like the nail on the coffin that you were like, I'm moving forward? Or was there a moment before that? That was
there were multiple moments. It was like, I swear to God, it's like a rocket that's trying to launch into space, I'm realizing. Or that's one analogy, or because you have to break through the atmosphere. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of resistance. You have to like break through that. And then once you're in space, you're kind of coasting. That's one analogy. The other part that I was calling it was like, you're like stuck in tar and you're just like getting out of tar. You're trying to remove it from your skin. And it's just like, it's residue, right? It's like just stuck to you. Both are, I don't know.
What's the better analogy here? I'm not sure.
I like it because both of them have that heaviness to them, but at the same time, there is that light at the end of the tunnel. You know that once the tar is off your body or once you break through the atmosphere, that there's no turning back. You just keep going.
Right. And even like, here's the funny thing is, even while we were together and talking about breaking up, we had even talked about, should we break up and then see again in a year? We negotiated. We talked about a lot of different scenarios.
I've done that before.
Yeah. How'd that go for you, Julie? How'd that go for you?
Well, we don't have time to do this on the podcast.
Wait, who's the guest today?
That's another whole episode for another time.
But you know, that is just so telling of two people who truly care about each other and want to work things out authentically. And you're not trying to give up, because at some point, I'm sure you go back to your respective homes and you think, if we just try hard enough, we can make this work. Let's play out all the scenarios.
And you want to believe it, like, especially just like from what we're shown in like movies and all this shit. It's like, you want to believe that love is enough. And and I do, and what I'm learning, so I will counter Mr. Manson. I do think love, it does conquer all, and it is enough, but the recipient or who that love is placed upon is the most important thing. So as cliche as it sounds, the main thing that I was learning through the breakup, through like literally from the moment that we were coming to this conclusion, and it hit me, because it hit me, like we were saying, immediately. It hit me instantaneously, like, oh shit, this is really happening. I have to figure out my entire life now. I broke down, you guys. And so that recognition of how much I was
not loving to myself was really obvious really quick. And that was very unsettling, very upsetting, very scary to like recognize that without him, I was like, what the hell do I do now? And I don't like even saying that out loud because I'm a very independent, very ambitious, in some ways very confident woman, but in that I completely fell apart.
I actually think that's when the breakups are the hardest in a way. I mean, I think like there's so many such different factors. So I'm not going to say it's like only that, like obviously just the depth of it and all that. But I remember like from my own instance, I felt like I lost myself a little in the relationship because I was so focused on this person. So that's when like he was gone. It just felt like this major void was gone. And I mean, if you're in a relationship, there's going to be a void, right? Like someone's gone that you're used to being with all the time. So it's inevitable. But I think if you've like feel like you've lost a bit of yourself along with it, it like goes even deeper.
Yeah.
And
then like, kind of like climbing out of that hole, if you will. I don't know what that metaphor makes sense, but it's just it's freaking hard. And for somebody, again, it's also frame of mind, right? Like if I view myself and I have my own identity as like, I'm a strong, capable, independent woman. But in this instance, like you're just getting a very, very sobering reckoning. Like you're getting your ass handed to you of like, oh, are you now? Like, no, because I'm recognizing how much I had kind of thrown myself. In some ways, I think it's so beautiful, right? But I'd really like kind of put all of me into this relationship, and that was something that I really needed to sit with, and that like just sit in the pain and recognize there's something really not okay about it. It wasn't even just the pain, oh, he's gone. It was like I was like, who the hell am I? That's a scary place to be versus like, oh, I just missed somebody and it's so sad that this person's now gone. It was straight up panic and like fear. I don't know how else to put it, but if anything, the silver linings, which I'm a very silver linings kind of person, at the end of the day, I'm much an optimist. It was the thing that I think I needed to reconcile some trauma, some like unresolved issues with family. I had an abusive boyfriend as a teenager that I hadn't fully healed from, like things like that. They all came to the surface in rapid succession. It was just like one after another. I was like, all right. And now we have a pandemic.
With you too. Like,
but you know, so I had a conversation with my coworker about this, who recently gave birth. And when she was pregnant, she said the hardest thing she had to deal with was the change in her identity. And I think one of the things that as women especially is that we go through all these different kinds of identities that are really hand in hand with the other people in our lives. Like I am a daughter, I am a girlfriend, I am a friend, I am a dog mom. Like these are all identities, right? And when you lose that person who gives you that identity, you lose a part of yourself. That is absolutely true. So I think as independent women, it's really hard to reconcile that because we think, well, I'm independent, which means I have this independent identity, but we forget that it is really like relative to the other people in our lives.
Absolutely.
And it's also the loss, not just of the person, but of the life that you thought you were going to have.
Yeah.
Like, I think that is really hard to grapple. I remember just like having this hard time too, just being like, okay, now, like, I think it was because I had been single before for a long time, like dating all the time. And then I finally met that person, right? And then when it ends, you're like, oh, I'm back here again.
Yeah.
You know? And
except like, you're older and you're like, and I was not, I really had put a lot of work into like being a modern woman where I'm like, you know what, and I'm very spiritual too, you know, I'm like divine timing, when things happen, they happen. And, you know, miracles have happened in my life before. I'm no exception. I don't dictate this, but I was recognizing how much of a control freak I was. And the fact that like all these elements of my life that I had really been doing my absolute best, working so hard to kind of keep in this safe little bubble so that it could be all that I dreamed of and more, you know, just ripped away. Like you said, it's like, it's a little death. Any relationship, like when you care about somebody, you got to grieve it. It's grieving. And then learning how to be alone and really the identity of, do I love myself? I think I had made a lot of headway, especially in that previous stint of being single and like dating around, learning how to have boundaries, saying no, which is funny. As soon as I met my ex, like all the boundaries went out. I'm like, sure. Live with me.
Oh my God.
Dangerous ground, guys.
I don't know about you two, but I know that when I go through a breakup, the first thing that comes to my mind is panic. Like, oh my God, I have to do this shit all over.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, I have to get myself back out there. What's out there? Is there anybody out there?
Yeah.
And how do I develop feelings again with someone and start from square one?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that panic?
I don't even know. Like, I'm trying to think back on how it was. This is like, honestly, me putting my heart to anybody who's going through heartbreak, because we have all gone through it in some form, and maybe, you know, I don't want it to, but maybe will again in the future. But it's just, sometimes you feel like I likened it to like feeling like I was hanging on by my fingernails. Like, I just felt like I just need to get through this moment, and not feeling such like just not feeling wanted, or like I felt, this was, again, I'm getting really deep into my psychology, but I was dealing with like abandonment issues. I felt like he abandoned me, even though the way he looked at it, and again, the way I even looked at it when I was in a sober mind, was that we're doing this to be the best we could be to ourselves and to each other. That's the rational way we're approaching it. When you're emotional and you're, you know, again, a human being that has a lifetime of trauma and a lifetime of like unresolved emotional issues. Yeah, I when I was angry and when I was sad, I felt like you just threw me aside and you left.
Oh, I've totally been there. I feel like I'm so resonating in your story right now, Minji.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, like it's definitely one of those things. I remember it was so logical, but for me, it was the same emotional trap that was like, oh, why, what did you not love me enough? Or like, what was it, you know?
Right.
But I think the way to answer your question, I've dealt with it multiple ways, because I've had a couple instances. I think the first time I dealt with getting that panic of getting back out there by just avoiding. And I think I didn't date for way too long. Like, I think I shouldn't say in retrospect I would fix it. I think I had to deal with what I was dealing, and that's what my truth was at that point in my life. And I think actually for me, like, I did take like a solid year that I really wasn't dating. Like, I had my ex was still there to some degree. Like, it wasn't like, so I guess it wasn't like totally, but we weren't seeing each other. But he was like mentally taking up space, if that makes sense. But we weren't seeing each other. I think I might have had no, I think I was pretty single. I definitely went through like a very long dry period too in that time.
I envy and respect that, Julie, because that's okay. My thing was like, I'd gone off the dating apps on and off as a single, because, you know, I'm sure you guys have talked about this so much on this podcast, was like, it's exhausting, it's so exhausting, but there's fun parts to it. That's why we do it. But there's it's exhausting. And so I'd definitely gone in waves. But I had always I knew that at least after this breakup, like I was like, I know that this is a distraction. I know that this is me feeling not pretty and wanting somebody to just want me, and being real with myself about that. So I did my very best, and I actually went a whole month without even downloading an app onto my phone. And for me, that was significant, you know. And in that month, I was literally dealing with the hardest emotions, like, again, front loading all the despair and just dealing with it, and doing my best not to go back onto that crutch, because I knew it was a crutch and it wasn't going to actually make me feel better at the end of the day, that it was a very fleeting distraction. Right. But it was after that month, you know, I did get back on. But it only proved my point. Like, it's just such a momentary.
But did you get back on during quarantine? Like, where was this in relation to quarantine? Like, when did you decide that, okay, I'm moving on from this relationship?
Yeah. So after a month after, so this is January, I had the apps on my phone. It just, like, it was a distraction. And then I got off of them because I was just like, this isn't good. And I focused on me, which I knew, it's like, you know, eating your vegetables, you know, that's what needs to be done. So I was like, I'm a freaking 34-year-old woman. I was in so much pain that I was like, let's just do the damn work. Let's just do the therapy. Yep. Let's talk about it. Like, let's do the meditating. Like, we got to do this. And so I actually traveled a bit. I went to see my brother in Seattle. This was right when COVID was like ramping up. So
in Seattle too.
Yeah, in Seattle. I went to Seattle, Austin, and New York within.
Oh my God.
And then I came back to LA and then went into lockdown. So, you know, like I was on it and I was swiping, but I wasn't ever like pursuing anything. Again, it was a distraction. And then I wasn't really active on it. So I don't know what the timeline is because I have no sense of time right now. And I had a lot of work to do. So yeah, I don't know. I guess more recently I was just chatting with people. I wasn't taking anything seriously, still am not. Like realistically, it's been really great because quarantine made me have so much more time for myself that I actually was filling up the hours really well with work. I work out a lot. It's been like the number one thing.
When I went through my bad breakup, I was like working out like twice a day. I remember. I was like,
that's pretty damn good.
It is. I have been working out twice a day, even if it's just like a walk, you know, but like I've been active. Great. Yeah. And then luckily I'm still working. Yeah, I agree. And the limited runs to the grocery store helps too. I'm like, oh, I can't just go get it. Like,
yeah.
That's true.
So, okay. So is this your first time doing therapy or have you done therapy before?
So my life is, I had done therapy really for the first time a couple of years ago. Actually my first love, the one that I mentioned when I was 10, he passed away in 2018. Wow. So actually that was tough because I was dating my ex at the time. So there's a lot of layers that we went through a lot together and I was going through a lot in life. So actually that was an impetus for me to actually get therapy. Realistically, it would have been really good for me, I think, if I had gotten therapy after my abusive ex when I was a teenager. That would have been a very important time, I think, to get therapy. But being Korean American and
right, like what's therapy?
What?
You know, waste of money.
Well, I mean, that's for my parents. But I mean, if I had asked for it or if I had pushed for it, they would have. But I was 19.
Right, you don't know.
We don't know. I did know, but see, I object on that because I was like this little woke kid at Berkeley studying public health. Like I knew therapy would be good. I just, for a lot of different reasons, like just didn't let it apply to me up until it really, really mattered. So again, I can't change the past, but better late than never, right? So I did start therapy a little bit in 2018. It was expensive, etc. I'm a freelance, you know, creative producer and actor. Like I didn't have tons of money, so I didn't make it a priority to pay for therapy. But after this breakup, I've been doing therapy every week.
Got it. So this time around, it's more of a priority.
100% a priority.
So that's a big difference.
It is a very big difference.
And did you make that a goal from the very beginning, or was this something that, like, as you healed along the way, you decided to implement it?
I think it was more along the way, but it was definitely something in my gut, instinctually, and even prior to the breakup, because we were fighting so much. And it was really taking a toll in terms of like my anger, my anxiety, my feelings of just like uncertainty about the future. It was mounting, you know? So I feel like I had already had months of knowing deep down that I would benefit from it, that it would be helpful. But to, again, take that leap, again, I'm still unpacking like what were the actual barriers between taking the step to actually do it and implement something that I knew for quite a while would be something helpful and important to me, and making it a priority and making it something that, you know, no excuses. I'm going to make it happen. Because I'm really good about that in a lot of other aspects.
Of course.
My life.
Yeah. Right.
Well, when I went through my brutal breakup.
Brutal therapy. They really beat you up.
That's actually the first time though I started therapy. Like I started BetterHelp. That was like the first one, the online version. And I found that like a really great gateway into therapy. And I always say that. I think it's like a really great accessible way to get started. And then, not to plug, but they are a Dateable sponsor. So
yes, they are. We love them.
Can they holler at me because I pay them? I'm like, that's what I've been using.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I think especially right now in virtual land where we can't see people anyways, it's like the perfect solution. I did end up deciding to go to in-person because I just felt like I wanted to try that experience. And it honestly, like as difficult as the breakup was for me, it totally changed me as a person. Like, I think like the layers of depth I got after that breakup and just from, I mean, obviously the experiences I went through in that relationship, but also just the work that I did on myself with therapy. It was like monumental. Like I'm I'm forever grateful for that experience, because I don't think I'd be the person I am today without it.
100% agree. As excruciating as it is, right? And that's what I think. Even again, the annoying optimist in me is like, even with all of this that's happening right now, it is mad uncomfortable, and it's so like just kind of throwing us all into this crazy turmoil of evaluation and discomfort of not being able to do everything that we want to do, and having to prioritize and think of, you know, all the different consequences of every single little action. It's so exhausting. But at the same time, I feel like sometimes that's what it takes to like really get it together, right? And that's a good thing to come out of it.
That's a key word there, is that discomfort. When you're uncomfortable, that's the only way to change and push yourself forward. So what I love about this conversation is that, Minji, you could act as a future person for somebody listening to this episode right now who's going through what you went through, let's say 3 months ago, and you're like coming to them from the future. And in hindsight, what do you think are some of the things that you did to make yourself uncomfortable, but that you really reaped the benefits from?
Oh, you're so good, Yue. Gosh. Such a great coach. I think really sitting in the hurt, like that's one thing. I just had to sit in it instead of distracting. That first month, I still, it's so like lame, but I'm like, I want to congratulate myself, as stupid as that sounds. I want to give myself props for not repeating what I knew would be bad for me. That was for me, you know what I mean? For somebody else's measuring stick, it may be something completely different, but it's like an addict, right? Like you went a whole month and you didn't go back to what you knew logically and in your gut would not help you. And for that, I do want to give myself grace and credit because I let myself grieve. And there's nothing like that pain sitting in your bones to remind you, like, I will not go through this again if I can help it, right? And learning how to transmute that pain into like love for yourself, for lack of better words, is really powerful. And so sitting in the pain was one thing. Taking responsibility, that was a second thing. In sitting in the pain and then taking time really to reflect. And thank you again to quarantine. I needed to. I had the space to do it. But also, I could have chosen to just Netflix all day and not.
Right.
Yeah. You still made a choice. Yeah.
I was just like, again, it came to like the priorities. I was like, oh my God, I'm 34. I'm newly single. We're quarantined now. I don't know when the hell I can ever meet somebody. If I do want the family that I want, that literally is one of the reasons why we broke up, was because I had decided like, I do want to have a family ideally in the next few years. That means I cannot just spend the next year or two dicking around and just like, you know, and now we're in quarantine. I got to get it together. I need to like get right with myself.
And one of our episodes that we had this season was called Quarantine for Fuckboys, but it actually went pretty deep. And it was with Shallon Lester, and she made a really great analogy how, like, you know, in the winter, bears hibernate and they like get their shit together. And there's nothing wrong with that. And they need that in order to thrive when it becomes time that they're out of hibernation. So she was saying that the quarantine is the perfect time. Because like I think the question that led up to it was like, what happens when you're freaking out that you're losing valuable time in your like dating life, especially as like the clock is ticking, you're getting older, etc. And she was saying like the value of working on yourself is a step towards that.
100%, 100%. And I think the payoff is like, it's invaluable. You can't even measure that, because for me, it was recognizing all the ways that I had contributed to the demise of the breakup. You know what I mean? Like the immature version of me, I think in past life, I would be really just like sitting in pain, but you know, I don't know, like coming from like a super egotistical way of just like, you're better off without him, like forget him. I didn't want to though. Like I cared about him, and I was trying to look at it from like, what am I supposed to learn out of this? Because why am I here again? I thought this was going to work out. I thought this was it. We have so much love for each other. We had XYZ, you know, had all these components. Why did it not work? And it really hit me hard. And I had to, accept responsibility for the ways that I contributed to not having it work out. And those are very real. It's not like blaming him or blaming me. It's just really becoming more objective about it and saying that stuff I need to work on. That is something that's completely separate from him, because take that person out of the equation.
Right.
If things if shit goes down and you get into a conflict, I saw patterns. I was like, I freak out. I shut down. I don't, like we were talking about, like, I recognize I'm not as good of a communicator as I thought. You know, the pattern that we had in our relationship, why he would come to these different conclusions that I get so angry about. But I'm like, did I ever clearly state what I wanted, you know? And if and when I changed my mind, which happens in a human's life, you know, I changed my mind from being super casual to becoming a lot more serious. And how did I communicate that to him? And was that reasonable? Was that fair? If I was on the receiving side of that said communication, would I have taken that well? A lot of them were like sucky answers to like really be like, oh, I handled that pretty bad.
I mean, that's so important, because I think we were talking about earlier, like the people that just jump right back into dating or distract themselves, they don't have that time to process it. And I think you need that time, because if you don't, you're just going to get into another relationship and the same shit's going to happen again.
Right. I've had breakups before, and I definitely didn't take that time to process. I did process things, but sometimes I'm just recognizing, like, you'll get taught the same lessons over and over until you learn the lesson. You know what I mean? And I'm a pretty stubborn person.
So were there any like tactical things that you did? Like, did you journal? Like was there anything that you can pass on as like advice for people, or was it really just therapy? Like, what?
Therapy was one part of it. And it was a process, because I went through multiple therapists before I kind of found the one. But even then, I'm recognizing, I think I'm treating this like, don't put too many expectations on even that one, because maybe she's a great therapist for this particular moment, and being really, really aware and okay with it just served that purpose. And if I don't need to stay with that therapist forever.
Oh yeah.
You don't need to be married to that.
We had a therapist on the show once, and she said that she had like 5 therapists. Remember that? She had like different therapists for different things and different stages of life. So it's totally a thing. And I think that what you just said too about finding the one, that's also a thing, because it's like, if you don't jive with that person, how the hell can you just like unload your life to them?
Exactly. And I'm honestly, really, the focus of the takeaways from this period of my life is to genuinely learn to love myself. And loving yourself doesn't mean just doing whatever you feel like. I'm really learning what that means. Like, it means protecting yourself and disciplining yourself and protecting, you know, what you want in the long term versus short term. That takes a lot of maturity and self-awareness to be able to do that. Not only theoretically know it in your head, but to act on it, that's also different, right? So all the little things that I was doing was learning how to trust myself. If I said I'm going to work out today, and working out that day was building trust between me and me. You know what I mean? And like, I've just gone full spiritual woo-woo, frou-frou, all of, because it honestly has saved my life, to be honest. It's preserved my sanity. It's given me clarity, because I'm like, I really am living and walking the talk of like, if you're not good to you, you're not good to anybody. You know what I mean? There's a limit.
That's what dating yourself is about. You're showing yourself love. You're courting yourself.
Yes.
And you're showing yourself what romance should feel like. And that's what helps you to recognize love with someone else. If we don't show the love to ourselves, how would we ever know what kind of love that we want?
Exactly.
Right. So what revelations did you have out of this time? Like, what do you want in the future now? And has it changed from before?
I think it has. Definitely one of the criteria, you know, I recognize, I've accepted, I do want somebody like my grandma. We were talking about this last week. My grandma was arguing that like, I don't need somebody good looking. Like, looks are overrated, and that good looking people cheat, and you just need somebody that will like be a good provider and believes in God. Like, that's what she summarized.
So practical. Yeah.
Good. But I'm kind of like, I'm merging the practical with the romantic. And I'm just like, I do want to be attracted to the person I'm going to sleep with and have children with. But like, my criteria, you know, someone that I enjoy spending time with, but also really someone who'll be a good dad. I mean, that's just become a big thing in my life, somebody who wants a family. And if I would want my child to be like them, period, you know, big thing of before was just like, how ambitious are you? Like how passionate are you as a person? Like all these things that I don't think are bad, but they definitely evolved, you know?
Got it. So it helped you like kind of fine tune what you're looking for.
Yeah. And it's just where I'm at in life too. I don't think I was wrong for wanting the things I wanted before. That's like me, again, loving myself and just forgiving, you know, that's what you wanted. Now, what do you want now? Stop freaking out about everything that happened before. Learn from it and then apply it. Literally, it's all you can do.
But you're seeing goals of like marriage, kids, all of that hasn't changed. It's more now you have a better path to find someone that equally shares that.
Right.
Is that what I'm getting? Okay.
I think so. And to have more realistic, more gracious expectations of what that will actually look like. I'm very thankful to my last relationship because living with somebody and really merging my life. And he wasn't the first one because the previous ex was like that as well, but just not in the same intensity. But merging your life with someone is incredibly sacred and it's important. And it's not to be taken lightly. So you got to do your part. And it's also recognizing like, I can't have somebody be responsible for my happiness, period. At the end of the day, my feelings and my sanity, I got to handle that. That is my responsibility. And that I think is the biggest shift in who I am entering any relationship now onward versus a previous version.
That's so important because that's so much expectation for someone, right? So.
Yeah. I can imagine. But also like we talked about this on our thing. Who knows what marriage even means or
right
anymore?
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll see. All of it's just open.
So are you back to dating now that we're like starting to exit quarantine? What's your plan? Or you still need more time?
Idea, you guys, you tell me what I'm supposed to do. You guys are Dateable podcast because I genuinely, I mean, I match with people, and again, none of it was taken seriously because we're in quarantine. But I've noticed patterns about like dumbass guys who are like asking to meet up, and I'm like,
right,
insane. No.
Well, we started alluding to this earlier, and I think it's tough because I'd love to hear what you've gone through too. But I mentioned the time that I definitely took a lot longer to start dating again. And then I remember like after my last relationship, I'm like, oh, hell no, am I not doing that again? That was such lost time. So I remember I like booked a date like a week after, and I met up with this guy, and I remember like on the date, like there was nothing wrong with the date at all. It was totally fine. There was no chemistry, but there was nothing wrong. And I just remember like losing it. Like I literally like went to the bathroom and started to like tear up. And then I like kind of made it that I was ready to go. It was like winding down anyways. I got in the Uber and I just like burst out in tears. And I was like, okay, this is like, I can't just jump right back in either. So, because I was like, oh, I did the work last time. Like I can just go. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't think there is like a set answer, but I think from other experiences, like you kind of know when you're like ready again, like you're like excited. I think it's like when you're forcing it, that's when it's a bad situation. It doesn't usually end well because you're like going because you feel like you have to like move forward, but you're not excited about it and you aren't really ready, right? So I think when you finally get that itch that you're like, I want to meet someone again, like I think that's when it's like a great time to start.
I think so too. And it's an evolution in having self-awareness at each step, right? You're kind of like, you're dipping your toe back in, and because it was just like such a nightmare going. Part of it was fun of like, oh wow, there's so many great people. I genuinely think there's so many wonderful people out in the world, and to whatever degree you're going to connect with that person, that is a complete question mark. You never know. You can be the greatest person, doesn't mean you have chemistry, doesn't mean you connect, have the same values. You're all, that's all the mystery of why we have movies and music and everything. But I also was like used to dealing. It wasn't my first time participating in this rodeo. So the same annoying triggers came back to you. And I was like, oh God, this is why I hate this so much.
I think though
dumb conversations.
UA calls it roadkill, and I love that term because it's like
nobody wants to be roadkill.
I think though you have to like it's unfortunate that you have to, but like I know even now I like recently ended something and I like immediately got back on the apps and I don't know, I started like talking to people and I'm like, I don't think I really want to be doing this right now. So I'm still like this like passive sitting duck on the apps that I'm like swiping on people and not really replying. But I am doing a phone call tonight. So I'm like starting to get ready, you know? Like I think it's like you're starting to hit it. But I had to be that person. And I'm sure all those people that were messaging me getting no reply are just like, fuck this person, right? Or like that guy I went on the date with that I was like, literally ended up in tears. It had nothing to do with him. Like, that's unfortunate, but like you kind of need to do it to see where you're at and get that barometer.
Yes, do it, but with precaution, because don't forget there is another human being that you're corresponding with. And spoken as someone who has been roadkill many times, I don't want to be part of that situation. Like I've definitely met guys on apps who are like, oh, I went through a breakup a few months ago. I'm getting myself back out there. I'm feeling good. And I don't know, is that a red flag? I don't know if you're really ready, and they don't really know, and I can't fault them for it. So I would just say, yes, you should get, when you feel ready-ish, getting yourself back out there, just tread lightly. And my first, like when people tell me they may be ready to get back into dating, I always say, how excited are you about meeting someone new right now? Not just for dating, just a new person in general.
Right.
And if they say, I feel like it's a little daunting to meet a new person, then I'm like, you're not ready to date. You're not ready to go out there again. But if someone's like, I'm genuinely excited to meet someone new, to learn something from them platonically, then I'm like, okay, maybe you are, somewhat ready. We just can't forget that we're dealing with human beings here.
Exactly.
Well, I think also like when I took that like year off, right? Like I was in I was just going through my own personal journey, right? So I was like in therapy. I was like getting over this devastating breakup. Like I was not someone that anyone would want to date at that point, right? And I also felt like for me, because dating does bring up a lot of emotional stuff too on a good day. Like when you're like perfectly sound, you get ghosted or someone just like, like there's so many things that can happen. So at least the way I was looking at it as I was like, I am already on the brink of emotional, like I'm not like anything extra that happens with dating will just like send me over the edge. So I feel like for me, I needed to get back into a place that I had that self-love and could handle those ups and downs of dating emotionally.
I think that's very, very wise, Julie. And I think I'm of the same mind, maybe just not as consciously, but increasingly like, this is a lot. I've gone on a few virtual dates and they're pleasant, it was just a reminder like, wow, again, there are really cool people out there. Again, it doesn't mean this is your future husband or even somebody that you even maybe want to meet up with in real life, like in person. And again, the criteria for that, like it's literally, have you been tested for COVID? But did you also do an antibody test? But like, where have you been since then? Like there's a lot more at stake right now. And so to think of all these hoops that we now have to run through, I think it's just, again, you calibrate like the worthiness of this interaction in such a different way. Then I'm like, this is a waste of my life.
I don't know though. I think you said that the quarantine was the best thing to have to happen to you, to put you in this space that you had to confront this. I almost feel like virtual dating is perfect for where you're at right now.
Yeah.
Because it's like low commitment and also like, okay, like if you're not the person that is like, I'm so ready to be there, like you're not really wasting people's time as much. Like getting on a call versus like going on a date is very different.
Very low stakes, low investment.
Yes, but also has been proven that video calls are extremely exhausting, probably more exhausting than in person.
How so? Can you elaborate on this? I want to know.
Oh yeah, there's like studies on this.
Well, like the Zoom, like everyone's exhausted from Zoom because you're staring at the screen and there's something just, you like can't turn your attention away because then it's very obvious when you do. So it's like full attention. There's nothing distracting you. You can't it's not like you're at a bar and you can look at the people around you. You're just staring at this person. It gets very exhausting. So again, like your truth is whatever you're feeling in the moment. And if you feel like you want to meet some people, you want to talk to them, by all means do it. But you also have to know yourself very well to the point where you're like, okay, I think I should take a break, or
Right.
I can keep going with this. So I think we should get into some takeaways, because what I'm hearing from this, and I hear this over and over again, is like when people, when they're going through a period of loneliness or trying to get over a breakup, they ramp up really fast and then they overexhaust themselves on so many levels, physically and mentally. And I work in the fitness industry, and this is a really interesting fact, is that most people skip the cool down for workouts because they think they're like, I already got the benefits from the workout. Why do I need to cool down? People who skip cool downs regularly gain more weight, because when you overexert your body is creating cortisol, which then is turns into sugar, which then makes you gain weight. And what that really means is when you don't give your body the rest that it needs, your body actually goes against what you're trying to accomplish. And that's exactly how people should think about relationships too, and dating and being alone, is that you have to give yourself a break. You got to take that downtime and cool down, recover, take a few days of rest, and then you can ramp up again. You can't keep spiking, because it's actually counterproductive. And what you're doing, Minji, is great, because this is almost like this forced cool down for you before you get into that next workout again. But you've taken the time. What I really appreciate about what your story is, you've taken the time to separate the relationship that you went through and what you are going through. Like what I'm hearing is you're going through this like identity evolution, and that's very separate from you getting over your breakup. They're kind of like two separate paths, which means you're on a path to really evolve your life, and you're going to come out of quarantine a new person. And it doesn't mean that this is like, oh my gosh, she knows, she's figured out dating, but you haven't used this time just to think about like, oh, what do I need to do to make this relationship work? It's more like, what do I need to do to make my life work for what I'm trying to accomplish? That's very admirable.
I love that. I think I was going to say a similar takeaway. It's like this time can be the best thing for you if you let it be. And I think like oftentimes we think about breakups and just thinking about the negative and the devastation. I think I'm an optimist also, that I feel like I always try to see like what can be good that comes out of it. And I mean, we've obviously pointed to so many reasons, like within your story and then other stories that we shared on this podcast today, of just like how this can really transform you as a person and set you up for the relationship you want. So I think like, even if you're not going through a breakup, if you are in a situation where you're burnt out on dating, or things have not been progressing the way that you want, I think taking that time and not being afraid to feel like you're missing opportunities and all the FOMO is coming in, like quarantine is that best time because we had to, but it doesn't mean that now that restrictions are starting to get lifted, it doesn't mean that you can't do it still. Like I did it when there was no quarantine, there was no COVID-19. Like it's not fun. Like it's not fun to sit with your thoughts, but you have to do it to like push through. And I think like a lot of people at the beginning of quarantine were kind of freaking out because it was the first time that they weren't distracted. Like you didn't have an event to go to, you didn't have a, date to line up, and you had to sit with your thoughts. And I think it can be very, very scary, but I think the rewards are so worth it.
I completely agree. You both are so great at these takeaways and so eloquent. I feel like I've been analyzed in like the best way possible. I feel reborn, and I also want to be very encouraging, because it is, like both of you said, it's a process. It's not going to be comfortable, but I personally right now I can say I feel like one of the happiest places I've been in for me personally, even though I'm definitely still struggling on a day-to-day basis because the rest of the world is like a freaking dumpster fire right now. But I'm working on using whatever I have learned from my own personal experience, whether, and even though that's like in a dating and self-identity realm, but to apply it to all the turmoil that's arising in all of humanity right now, whether that's health related or economically related or cultural and racism, and like all this shit is just like being purged right now. And it's a very macro version of like what I felt I was going through on a micro level personally. So in that way, I feel like I can commiserate with this, like this upheaval, right? It's like all this shit is being put out there. And so just to remain, as much as I humanly can, a role of like encouragement. I think a lot of the healing that happens externally, even systematically, even up to the levels of like government, happens internally first. And there's so much that I want to do and achieve both in a romantic relationship and outside of it. But all of those still are rooted within me, the way that I manage myself, manage my feelings, my psyche, my sleep schedule, my fitness, the way I talk to myself. And so that's going to be on a very micro day-to-day basis. That is a lifestyle commitment that's way beyond quarantine. And I thank quarantine for helping facilitate that. But it's definitely, not the end. And I appreciate this like little chrysalis moment. But it ain't over. And what I'll say is like, because we're in this world where like literally anything goes now, right? Like what is life? What is time? What are rules? Like nothing applies really anymore. So in that way, it feels kind of like this crazy, weird blank canvas. Like, let's do it the way we want to do it. And I have gone, again, what I said, full spiritual woo-woo. I'm doing self-love stuff that I really genuinely looked at previously as like, oh my God, this is like some Gwyneth Paltrow shit. Like, this is for like
my pussy again.
Yeah, it's like what crystals do I need?
Oh my God.
And I'm just leaning in.
I think you said something though that I do want to like reiterate, because I mean everything you just said was so important to hear, but you said something that you are you are happy right now. And I think so often we feel like we need to be in relationships to be happy. And I think one of the books that got me through my period, we actually had her as a guest on our show. It was from season 6, episode 15, Meeting Your Half Orange. And it was an author, Amy Spencer. So I definitely recommend the book.
Okay.
Because she like takes you through journaling exercises, and it's like imagining like the life that you want to have. And it's so amazing. But her whole point was like, she was kind of like this, she was like, don't just get out there and go date and do all this stuff. Like, if the whole point to be in a relationship is to be happy, just like beeline for the happy and like figure out what makes you happy. And that's usually when you end up attracting people anyways. And the best relationships is when you're happy in your own skin and just doing life and being yourself.
Amen. One thing that my takeaway, hopefully, if anyone's down to try it, I highly recommend. I've been doing it the last few days, and it's kind of changing my life because I'm doing all the affirmations. I'm doing all the things, doing a lot of self-care. My skin's glowing way more than it has. But I'm doing mirror work, and I've been on affirmations, which is basically, saying things like, I am whole, I am healthy, I'm abundant, I am worthy, saying these things to transform the voice in your head, which is usually the worst voice ever. It's usually the biggest critic and so hard and very judgmental, which is definitely has been me. But doing mirror work is like looking at yourself deep in your own eyes, telling yourself like, Minji, I love you and you're beautiful and I got your back and I'm not going to let you down. And, no matter what happens to you, I'm always here. Saying that to my face, I broke down crying because I had never like said that I was like the way I speak to somebody I love. Even you guys, like if you had a bad day, I could speak the best words of encouragement and I would mean it 110% because I would look at you and see the best version of both of you and sing your praises and reassure you and comfort you. To do that for myself, if anybody is willing to even try it, it's really hard. But once you do it and get past the uncomfortable, like, what the hell am I doing right now? it really like, I'm feeling lighter. I'm feeling like I don't feel as lonely. There's moments.
I love that
I don't feel so
takeaway. I love that takeaway because it's like the way you talk to yourself. Like, would you ever talk to a friend that way? Like, you're not the only person that struggles with that. I think a lot of people struggle with that, myself included. And yeah, I think it's the mindset is everything. We always say that on this podcast, and the best way to change your mindset is to change that inner dialogue that's happening for you.
Right.
That's
And
really
also
great.
one more sidebar is like because I'm actually good with being alone. Like I actually genuinely enjoy my alone time a lot. Even though I have little moments of loneliness, it really just naturally raises standards. Because if like
Mm,
I would rather chill by myself reading a
for
book
sure.
or taking a walk listening to like Ariana Grande and Lady Gaga, if that's like more appealing than having a conversation with XYZ person, guy, friend, whoever, I'm fine. Like, I'll just like, it's easy to walk
Amen.
away. I'm like, you take care. Like, have a good life. I'm not.
I always do the sit in bed with my dog test. Like
Oh.
would I rather be with this person or sit in bed with my dog?
Yeah.
There's a
Good
few
test.
times I've left a guy's house because I'm like, I'd rather sit at home with my dog.
Well, I remember like when I was going through my situation, like I never really spent time alone before that. And I think that's like part of what
Mm.
was so difficult for me is that I was like before when I wasn't dating him, I was just like always going out. I was always with friends. Like I was just always with someone, right?
Mhm.
And I think because I was just so down and just depressed, to be completely honest, like I spent a lot more alone time. And I started to like, it wasn't just like alone depressed on the couch. Like I went and took like trips by myself. Like I went, like it
Mhm.
wasn't
Oh,
big
you love
trips,
it, yeah.
but I would like go up to like Calistoga by myself to like the hot springs and treat myself. And honestly, like I would go to the hot springs with friends after, and I'm like, I prefer to go there myself.
Yeah.
I went with UA once, remember? And I was like, you're not at the pool enough. I'd rather be myself. I did enjoy your company, but I did like going myself too. And I think like finding that solstice in yourself, and that honestly for me has made this quarantine a hell lot easier as someone that lives alone
Yeah.
and was, I guess, primarily single. I was entertaining some stuff, but I was primarily single in the time. But I think it
Mhm.
made it a lot easier to be on my own during this tough time because I had done it before.
Right. Oh, I love it. Good for you. And that's they say like, I'd rather be lonely than be lonely in a relationship, right?
For
I don't
sure.
even you guys said that last week because we
Yeah.
had such a great talk. Same thing. And I genuinely appreciate all these learning lessons. It would be really, really nice to have somebody that I'm excited to meet with. And I feel like it'll be that much more easy to identify once it happens,
Mm.
because, and quite frankly, honest, it's not even just being alone, but there's so many important things happening right now. I am very like involved in my community. I'm very involved in social justice stuff that I think, we only, if anything that quarantine and COVID taught us is that life is not guaranteed and we don't know when we're going to come and go.
Right.
And time and health and all of it, our energy is very precious. So I would like to allocate that well, where I go to bed every night being like, I think I spent that day well.
Mm.
And I do, as much as I love romance and it has been the drug of choice, I also am choosing like, there's other things that I really am passionate about contributing my time to. And if I'm sorry, just like to a guy, it's like either you augment my life and make it like your respite or an oasis or something that's like enjoyable and fulfilling or feeds my passions or something. Like if it doesn't add to that, there's other things that like I can really contribute myself to that
Mm.
are just as fulfilling, And I would love to have a wonderful, hot, great partner, all about it. But if it's not there, like, again, I don't want to settle. Like, I don't want to like go backwards. So in that way, I'm like really looking forward to the future. And right now it's a really important time, I think, for us to prioritize. There's a lot calling for our
Yes.
attention.
Yes, absolutely. And prioritize how you treat yourself during this time too. It's very, very important.
Yes. Very true.
Lovely. Very well said. Any other lasting pieces of advice for any of our listeners? The only thing I would say is like, I really like having this conversation with both of you because I think the three of us are on the same page. But then sometimes when I'm like alone by myself, my emotions, it's really hard for me to be emotional. And in the last year, and Julie knows this, I lost my college best friend, my uncle, and my grandpa all in 1 year.
Oh.
And it's been really hard to deal with a loss emotionally because I would sit there and make myself cry and I can't cry you know, and then I cry at times when I don't want to. So a friend taught me this really great tactic, which she's like, sit in your pain, which you talked about, Minji, and visualize that emotion. So visualize yourself in a puddle of tears, and then turn the tears into something that's very lovely. So maybe turn them into trees, or turn them into puppies, or whatever. And that's a way to express yourself without forcing yourself to express yourself. So for anybody out there who's had a hard time even expressing yourself emotionally, I think just doing this like visualization tactic is really nice.